There are moments in life when silence is not just the best response, it's the only response that preserves your strength. The Stoics knew this. They knew that in a world full of noise, the man who can remain still, who can choose not to react, becomes untouchable. Silence is not weakness. It's the highest form of self-control. It's the difference between being ruled by your emotions or being ruled by reason. If this hits you somewhere deep, comment, "I needed this," and keep listening. Because you'll recognize yourself in these situations. You'll see the battles you fight every day, the ones no one else sees. To remain silent is to protect your inner peace. Marcus Aurelius wrote, not for others, but for himself, reminding his soul not to waste energy on things outside of his control. The discipline of silence begins when you resist the urge to defend yourself. When you're insulted, misunderstood, or provoked, the first instinct is to fight back. But a Stoic resists that pull. A Stoic pauses. That pause is everything. In it, you reclaim power. You separate what was said from how you choose to respond. This is where your freedom lives. We often believe that speaking up is always the brave choice, but Marcus reminds us there is greater bravery in saying nothing when your ego is shouting. Silence isn't passive. It is active resistance against emotional chaos. It is the hard decision to place principle above pride. You say nothing, not because you have nothing to say, but because what you say must be worthy of being heard. In the next sections, we'll walk through 10 powerful moments where silence is the true mark of wisdom. We begin with the last, because the last is often the most difficult, the one that tests even the strongest minds. But remember, you are not here to be entertained. You are here to sharpen the edge of your character, and that begins now. Situation 10, when you are right, but they won't listen. There is a rare and subtle torment that grips a soul when you are certain of the truth, yet the world around refuses to bend its ears. You know your logic is sound, your evidence meticulous, your intention pure. Still they interrupt, deflect, twist, refuse even to hear your words. In those moments, the heart burns with the urge to push harder, to expose the error, to illuminate the misunderstanding, to force acknowledgement. But here in this tension lies the final great test of Stoic silence. Imagine standing before a closed door. You knock, you speak, you reason, but the door remains shut. You can pound louder, curse, insist, or you can step back. The first is the impulse of wounded pride. The second is the decision of strength, because you cannot force a mind to open. Your duty is not to coerce, but to guard what is within your control. And silence here is not surrender, it is sovereignty. Marcus Aurelius never counseled blind obedience or passive retreat. He wrote words to himself to sharpen his own discipline. Yet we see in those pages a truth. There comes a point where speaking ceases to be virtuous. When your words encounter a heart unwilling to receive, they become noise. When they are rejected not because they are false, but because the listener refuses growth, then continuing to speak is corruption of your purpose. You may say, "But I risk leaving the lie unchallenged." Yes, but at what cost? If you sacrifice your inner peace, your integrity, your reason in service of someone deaf to reason, you lose more than you gain. The Stoic measure is not outward victory, but inward constancy. If you compromise that, you have lost even if they concede. So how do you enact this silence? First, speak what must be spoken, once, perhaps twice, with clarity, honesty, and respect. You tell your case, you expose your reasoning, you make the appeal. Then when all doors remain closed, you fold your hands. You retreat. You do not rage. You do not demand. You do not shame. You simply stand down. This silence is not cold. It is not bitter. It is not an act of contempt. It is an act of healing for yourself. You heal your spirit from the burn of expectation. You heal your mind from the depletion of arguing in the void. You heal your character by refusing to compromise your calm for the sake of proving your point. Marcus says, "If someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change, for I seek the truth." But what of the mirror reflection? If someone refuses truth even when it stands naked before them, then the Stoic must retreat. That retreat is not cowardice, but composure. You are not abandoning reason, you are preserving it. You are not quenching justice, you are saving your flame from burning out. Observe this: the most wasteful battle is the one with immovable minds. A river does not fight a mountain, it flows around it or retreats. The force expended against what will not yield is lost forever. So silence is your economy of strength. Let your words serve meaning, not ego. Let your spirit guard itself. In such silence lies a boundary. You show by your inaction that your soul is not a ground to be stirred by every wind. You show that your inner citadel remains intact even when your voice is ignored. Others may mishear you, twist you, refuse you, but they will never control the inner domain you defend by staying quiet. Your silence is your wall. Now do not mistake this for passivity. Acting is still within your power. You may fulfill your duty, you may live your principles, you may hold your posture, you may continue to teach through example, you may continue to show integrity in your deeds. But you no longer waste breath begging for acknowledgement. This is courage of a higher order, to know that even right words spoken to the wrong ears may sow greater harm than silence. Because words spoken in vain reveal a kind of desperation. They expose you to frustration, to bitterness, to retreat into emotional reaction. But silence draws the boundary. It preserves your peace. It reclaims your strength. Feel the relief when you no longer have to explain. Feel the calm when your spirit no longer depends on the nod of others. Feel the gravity of being unmoved by refusal. This is the quiet power the Stoics pursued. This is the sovereignty of your inner self. Finally, recognize that sometimes time itself opens doors. What is rejected today may be heard tomorrow. Silence is not eternal. Silence is strategic. You give space, you let things settle, you let truth have its own timing. You continue living by your principles. And if the day comes when the mind opens, you remain ready. Not desperate, but steady. So in that closed moment, when you are right but they won't listen, choose silence. Speak what must be spoken, then step back. Guard your soul. Let your silence speak volumes greater than any argument. You lose nothing but the demand to be heard. You gain everything: composure, clarity, inner fortress. Situation 9. When someone tries to provoke you. There are few trials more revealing than the moment someone deliberately tries to provoke you. Their words are sharp, calculated. Their tone is loaded with mockery or challenge. Their eyes search for your reaction. They want to pull you out of your center, to drag you down into the mud of emotion, conflict, and noise. This moment, while common, is not ordinary. It is a test, a mirror held up to your discipline. The untrained mind reacts immediately. Anger rushes in like fire, pride steps forward, and the ego roars. But the Stoic sees through this illusion. The Stoic recognizes that to respond in kind is to lose. Not the argument, something far greater. You lose your calm, your reason, your sovereignty. Marcus Aurelius reminds himself again and again, you are not harmed by what is said, but by how you respond. And silence here becomes your armor. To remain silent when provoked is not cowardice. It is the highest expression of control, because silence in this case is not passive, it is protective. It shields you from descending into the same state as your aggressor. It creates a space, a buffer, where your higher self can breathe. You become ungraspable, unshakable, and this is power, not power over others, but power over yourself. Now let's be honest, this is hard. It goes against every instinct you've been conditioned to follow. Society teaches you that to remain silent is to appear weak, to be walked over, to be submissive. But the Stoic understands something deeper. Silence in the face of provocation is not weakness, it's strategy. You don't silence yourself because you're afraid to speak. You silence yourself because not every opponent deserves your energy. Marcus wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." Think about that. Not to insult them more cleverly, not to destroy them with your wit, but simply not to become like them. In choosing silence, you preserve that difference. You draw a line. You say, "I will not meet you in the dirt. I will stay above." But what do you do with the emotion that rises anyway? The heat in your chest, the racing thoughts, the urge to respond. You breathe, you pause, you observe it without judgment. This is your training ground. This is the moment where philosophy becomes real. It's not in the books, not in the quotes. It's right here when someone tries to pull you into chaos and you stay still. You may ask, but what if others see my silence as weakness? Let them. That is not your concern. You cannot control how others interpret your actions. What you can control is your intention. You remain silent, not out of fear, but out of strength. You know what you are protecting. You know what you are building inside. And nothing, no insult, no bait, no challenge is worth compromising that. The beauty of silence in the face of provocation is that it often disarms the attacker. They expect resistance. They thrive on conflict. When you give them nothing, they are left with their own noise. You rob them of the satisfaction. But more importantly, you nourish your own peace. And peace, for the Stoic, is not a luxury. It is the foundation of a virtuous life. There is another layer here. When you are silent, you are not abandoning truth. You are choosing the right time for it. You are not obligated to respond to every insult, every lie, every falsehood hurled in your direction. Truth is not weakened by your silence. It is preserved. You guard it until the moment it can be spoken with dignity, not desperation. This silence is a kind of discipline that few pursue. It's not glamorous. It doesn't make headlines. It doesn't win arguments in public. But it builds something far more valuable: character. It sharpens your ability to choose stillness over chaos, to choose self-possession over reaction, to choose the long view over the immediate emotional release. And there's more. When you learn to stay silent in these moments, you begin to see the provocations for what they really are: distractions, tests, invitations to leave your path. But you have a path. You have work to do. You have a life to build that requires strength, not noise. Every time you walk away without speaking, you add a brick to that foundation. Let's imagine the moment in slow motion. Someone insults you. Their voice rises, their words sting, but you don't flinch. You feel the reaction rise, but you don't obey it. You inhale, you pause, you look at them, not with contempt, but with clarity. And then you say nothing. You simply walk away, not out of shame, but out of self-respect. That image, that is power. There's something sacred about a man or woman who can face fire and remain unmoved. Something magnetic. We're drawn to those who don't need to react. And why? Because deep down we know reacting is easy. Anyone can yell, anyone can insult back, but to remain composed, that's rare. That's Stoic. Remember, Marcus Aurelius ruled the most powerful empire of his time. And yet he wrote daily reminders to himself not to be moved by anger, not to lash out, not to react impulsively. He was not writing to sound wise. He was writing to survive his own humanity. And if he needed those reminders, so do we. When someone tries to provoke you, they are often speaking from pain, insecurity, or confusion. That doesn't excuse their behavior, but it explains why engaging won't help. You are not responsible for fixing them. You are responsible for not becoming them. That's where your power lives. And here's the final truth. Every time you remain silent in the face of provocation, you gain something. You gain time to think. You gain space to feel. You gain freedom from regret. How many times have you said something in anger and wished you could take it back? Silence spares you that. It is the safest form of wisdom. So the next time someone tries to push your buttons, remember this: silence is not the absence of a response. It is the most powerful response. It's you telling the world, I am not here to play games. I am here to live well. I am here to guard my soul. I am here to be unshakable. Stay silent, stay sovereign, and keep walking the Stoic path. Situation 8, when you feel the need to prove yourself. There's a whisper inside many of us, a soft but persistent voice that says, they don't see you, they don't respect you. You need to show them who you are. It shows up when you're overlooked, underestimated, questioned. It rises when someone challenges your competence, mocks your progress, or doubts your capacity. And in that moment, the urge ignites to prove yourself, to speak louder, to flex, to defend, to explain. But the Stoic asks, why? Why do you need their validation? Why do you hunger to be understood by those who may never even understand themselves? Marcus Aurelius would have told you, the need to prove yourself comes from within, not from others. It is not the world doubting you that weakens your spirit. It is your own doubt reflected outward. And so, the call of Stoicism in this moment is simple and hard. Remain silent. That silence is not defeat. It is dignity. It is the internal posture of someone who has already proven everything that matters to themselves. Because in Stoicism, the only approval that counts is the approval of your own reason. You are not here to impress, to parade your virtues, to sell your worth. You are here to live well, to act rightly, to stay in harmony with nature and with yourself. When you feel the need to prove something, pause. Ask yourself, who is the audience I'm performing for? And what prize do I hope to win from them? You'll find the answer is often a mirage. The respect you chase cannot be forced. The recognition you crave is unstable. The praise you long for today may become the criticism you dread tomorrow. So what remains? Your own judgment, your own standards. Marcus reminds himself, it never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own. This contradiction is a disease of the soul, and the antidote is silence. Not the silence of withdrawal, but the silence of certainty. You don't respond because you don't need to. Your actions will speak, your presence will reveal, your consistency will testify. This kind of silence is rooted in one thing: clarity. You know who you are. You know what you're building. You know the values you live by, and those who see, those who don't. But nothing in that equation is worth losing your peace over. You are not a product to be marketed. You are not a performer. You are a soul under discipline. Imagine a craftsman working quietly in a small workshop. He doesn't broadcast every tool he uses. He doesn't call attention to each move. He simply builds, day by day, silently, persistently. And one day, the world sees the final result and marvels. But that day is not his goal. His goal was always the craft itself. This is you. Your life is your work. Let them see it when it's finished. The temptation to prove yourself is strongest when you're still growing, when the fruits have not yet ripened, and that's when the silence matters most, because premature exposure leads to distraction. The more you explain, the more you dilute. The more you chase recognition, the more you veer from your path. The Stoic keeps to his rhythm. He works not for applause, but for virtue. Now, silence does not mean suppression. It doesn't mean you pretend to feel nothing when you're judged unfairly. It means you observe that feeling and choose not to let it rule you. You don't react, you reflect. You don't defend, you endure. You don't fight to be seen. You master yourself until being seen no longer matters. There's a freedom that comes when you no longer need to prove anything. A lightness, you become unbothered, your work becomes purer, your speech becomes cleaner. Your relationships deepen because they are not transactions of status, but connections of substance. You are no longer trying to be impressive, you are trying to be honest. Let's not mistake this for arrogance. Arrogance is loud. It shouts its worth constantly because it doesn't believe it. Stoicism is silent because it knows. You do not walk into a room needing anyone's permission to be whole. You do not enter conversations needing to dominate. You don't need the last word. You don't need the spotlight. You don't need the echo of praise. When you feel the urge to prove yourself, breathe. Let the silence stretch. Let the discomfort rise and pass. Let your discipline absorb the noise. And know this, the greatest things in the world have no need to explain themselves. Mountains don't apologize. Oceans don't brag. The sun doesn't need to convince you it shines. You are not what others say you are. You are what you consistently do in silence, in the early hours, in the long, unnoticed efforts, in the days you feel invisible and still keep going. That is your proof, and it is enough. Marcus Aurelius reigned as emperor, yet in his private writings he constantly warned himself not to let praise or criticism penetrate too deeply. He knew both were traps. Praise inflates the ego, criticism bruises it, and both distract from the only opinion that matters, your own, grounded in virtue. In a world obsessed with visibility, the Stoic values invisibility. Not because he is hiding, but because he is focused. He is working. He is becoming. The applause may come. It may not. It changes nothing. Because the reward was never to be admired. It was to live rightly day after day, no matter who's watching. So the next time you feel the fire rise inside you, the one that says, "They don't know who I am," smile. Let it burn, but don't speak. Let your silence remind you, I don't need to be seen. I just need to be true. And truth, in the end, always reveals itself. Situation 7. When you're surrounded by gossip and criticism. There's a kind of silence that is harder than all others. It's the silence you choose when you hear your name spoken in rooms you never entered. When voices whisper about your life, your choices, your failures, your imperfections. When those who don't carry your burdens still find the time to weigh your worth. This is the world of gossip and criticism, and the Stoic must learn to walk through it without losing himself. It is tempting, deeply tempting, to defend yourself, to clear your name, to correct the record, to confront the speakers. But ask yourself, what will it truly change? Marcus Aurelius reminds us that people will say what they want. They will speak what they believe, what they envy, what they fear, or what they don't understand. Their opinions are not truths, and your reaction doesn't make them any more or less so. In the marketplace of gossip, silence is not weakness, it's sovereignty. When you say nothing, you declare that your worth is not up for debate. You show that your peace is not hostage to someone else's misunderstanding. You remain grounded, not because the words don't sting, but because you refuse to let them redirect your focus. Your life is not lived in their mouths, it is lived in your actions. Marcus wrote, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been." This is not denial, this is power. When people criticize you unjustly, they speak into the air. It is only when you catch their words and take them into your soul that they gain weight. The Stoic lets them pass like wind. He listens, not to respond, but to observe, to study the soul of the speaker, not to wound them back, but to understand what drives them. Because often criticism is not really about you, it is about projection, about fear, about the unresolved pain of the other. And gossip, it is the language of idle minds. The Stoic does not descend into such speech, not in defense, not in retaliation. He remains still, and by his stillness, he rebukes it more forcefully than any counterattack could. Think about a fire. When no fuel is added, it dies. Gossip and criticism are fires that demand your attention to survive. Your silence denies them that oxygen. Your refusal to explain, to perform, to retaliate, that is your dignity. And over time, that silence becomes louder than any response. Now, this does not mean you never address harm. It does not mean you accept abuse. Stoicism is not passive surrender. It is active choice. You may speak when it serves justice, when it aligns with your principles, when silence would betray someone in need. But when the only goal is to preserve ego or save face, then silence is wiser. There's a higher road, one not paved with clever comebacks or dramatic exits, but with quiet strength. You walk it when you let others speak and choose not to respond. You walk it when your reputation is under fire and you choose to keep building your character. You walk it when others look for spectacle and you give them stillness. And here's a secret. People notice. They notice when you don't flinch, when you don't explain, when you carry yourself with quiet assurance. That kind of silence unnerves the shallow. It speaks of depth they can't measure. It speaks of conviction they can't shake. And in that silence, you reclaim control, not of their opinions, but of your soul. Marcus often reminded himself, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. The words of others are outside events. You cannot stop them from speaking, but you can stop yourself from being moved, from becoming reactive, from leaving your center to chase shadows. Let them talk, let them twist, let them guess. You remain. You wake up, do your work, act with integrity, and hold your peace. And over time, your life will speak. It will correct the record more powerfully than your voice ever could. It will outlive the rumors. It will disarm the critics. It will teach through quiet example. You must ask yourself, do you want to be respected or do you want to be unshakable? Because the need for respect often leads to exhaustion, but the commitment to inner strength leads to peace. You won't always be understood. You won't always be defended, but you can always be firm in who you are. Silence in these moments is a teacher. It teaches patience. It teaches endurance. It teaches self-restraint. It shows you who you are when the world misjudges you and who you refuse to become in response. That gap between what they say and how you act. That's where virtue lives. Let your silence be strategic. Let it be a pause, not a suppression, but a decision. Speak only when speaking aligns with reason, with purpose, with virtue. Otherwise, remain still. Let the world chatter while you grow roots, and one day, the same people who spoke against you may fall silent. Not because you silenced them, but because you rose above them. You showed them that their noise could not reach your depths, that their judgment was shallow, that your life was not a debate, but a demonstration. So when you are surrounded by gossip and criticism, say nothing. Show everything, not in words, but in how you move, how you persist, how you remain unmoved. That is stoicism, that is strength. Situation 6. When you witness injustice, but are not in control. Few situations test the soul more than seeing injustice unfold before your eyes, when harm is done, when lies are rewarded, when cruelty goes unchecked, and knowing you can do nothing to stop it. That feeling, helplessness wrapped in outrage, can consume even the calmest minds. The world seems off balance. The good are ignored, the wicked rise, and those who cry for truth are drowned out by noise. In such moments, silence feels like betrayal. But to the Stoic, it can also be discipline. Marcus Aurelius lived surrounded by injustice. He ruled an empire filled with corruption, ambition, cruelty, and betrayal. And yet, in his meditations, he writes not about changing the world, but about governing his own soul. Why? Because the Stoic knows control is limited, influence is earned, but inner virtue is always within reach. And when you witness injustice beyond your reach, your first duty is not to rage. It is to remain grounded. To be clear, Stoicism does not teach indifference. It does not say, let evil win. What it says is this: act where you have power, accept where you have none, resist what is wrong without letting it corrupt what is right within you. If you must speak, speak from reason, not reaction. If you must act, act from principle, not from passion. When injustice burns before you and your voice would change nothing, silence is not surrender, it is strategy. You are saving your strength for the fight you can enter. You are preserving your clarity for the moment when it will matter. There is no virtue in shouting into a void, but there is deep virtue in observing the chaos and choosing not to become it. The mind that wants to fix everything will break itself, because not everything is yours to fix. Not every injustice is within your grasp. Not every evil can be confronted directly. Marcus wrote, "You always own the option of having no opinion. There is never a need to get worked up or to trouble your soul about things you can't control." He did not say this to promote apathy, but to protect the spirit from drowning in futility. Imagine a doctor who sees pain everywhere but has only one set of hands. If he tries to cure everyone at once, he saves no one. But if he focuses where he is needed, he changes lives. The Stoic applies this wisdom to justice. You cannot stop every lie, you cannot right every wrong, but you can ensure your own life is not lived in falsehood, that you, at least, do not contribute to the injustice you hate. And sometimes, silence is the loudest protest. When the world demands your approval and you give none, when it asks for your participation and you withhold it, when it mocks the truth and you do not laugh along, that is resistance. Quiet, firm, unyielding. It is not the silence of fear, it is the silence of defiance. It says, I will not join you, I will not be changed by this. You are not made for rage, you are not made for bitterness. Those emotions feel powerful, but they are corrosive. They burn hot and then burn out. The Stoic chooses endurance. He endures the sight of injustice, not because it doesn't matter, but because he refuses to be ruled by it. His silence is not indifference, it is preparation. It is the stillness before the right action, the breath before the blow that matters. There will be times when you must speak, when your voice, even if small, can make a difference. Then you speak, not to be heard, but to be clear, not to argue, but to affirm what is true, not to win, but to remain faithful to your principles. And when those moments come, your silence before them will give your words weight. Because you do not speak often, but when you do, it means something. Injustice tempts you to lose yourself, to become angry, desperate, reckless. But the Stoic must ask, what does justice look like in me right now? Not in the world, not in the courts, not in the headlines, but in me. How do I carry myself justly when injustice surrounds me? That is the work. That is the battlefield. You may not control the outcome, but you always control the example you set. Let others lie. Stay honest. Let others cheat. Stay clean. Let others fall into mobs, into hysteria, into hatred. Stay centered. Your silence is your sanctuary. Your discipline is your message. Your peace is your rebellion. It is painful, yes, to see injustice and remain still, but that stillness can contain great power. It can hold your courage. It can guard your wisdom. It can keep you from acting rashly, from saying what cannot be unsaid, from doing what will haunt you later. Silence gives you time to remember who you are. And the Stoic remembers always, the world is not fair. It was never promised to be. But your character, that is your responsibility. The world may fall apart. Empires may rot. But your soul, your conscience, your reason, that is yours to protect. So when you witness injustice and feel powerless, ask, what is in my power? And focus there. It might be how you treat the people around you. It might be how you raise your children. It might be how you run your business. It might be the words you do not say, the violence you do not imitate, the bitterness you do not feed. Marcus Aurelius would say, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one, even when the world is unjust, especially when it is unjust. Because that is when good men are most needed, not always loud, not always seen, but always rooted. In those moments, silence is not nothing. It is presence. It is you, refusing to add to the noise. It is you, keeping your mind clear while others lose theirs. It is you watching injustice and saying, not with your voice, but with your life, this is not the way. You may not fix the world, but if you can keep your soul upright in a crooked age, that is no small victory. It is, in fact, the greatest act of justice you can offer." Situation 5. When you're criticized unfairly in public, there's a unique sting to being judged unfairly, and more so when it happens under the gaze of others. You may be accused falsely, mocked publicly, or shamed for something misunderstood. The room may fall silent, all eyes turn, some believe the lie, some look away. And there you are, caught in a storm you didn't summon, your reputation hanging in the air, your voice rising instinctively to defend. But the Stoic teaches otherwise. In this moment, perhaps more than any other, silence can become your shield. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are pained by any external thing, it is not this thing that disturbs you, but your judgment about it." And what is criticism, if not sound, carried by others' opinions? It enters your mind, stirs your ego, pokes at your image, and dares you to react. But here lies your test, not in proving them wrong, not in silencing the noise, but in remaining unmoved. To be criticized unjustly, especially in public, can feel like violence. It bruises the identity. It threatens the social ground beneath your feet. Your first instinct will be to explain, to argue, to reclaim the narrative. But that instinct is not stoic. That instinct is your ego grasping for safety. The Stoic does not silence himself out of fear. He silences himself out of strength, because he knows that what others think is not in his control. He knows that the truth is not always loud, that dignity does not perform, that real strength is calm when falsely accused. When someone criticizes you publicly, they may have an audience, but you still have a choice. You can join them in the mud, or you can remain where you are, centered, disciplined, principled. You can speak, yes, but speak only if your words will serve reason, not emotion. Otherwise, let your silence hold your truth. This silence speaks volumes. It says, "I do not answer to slander. I do not perform for misunderstanding. I do not trade my peace for applause." It is the stance of someone who knows that reputations are temporary, but character is permanent. Public criticism reveals more about the speaker than the target. Often it is driven by envy, ignorance, or insecurity. The Stoic studies the soul of his accuser not to hate, but to understand. He sees the brokenness in their tone, the fear behind their exaggeration, and instead of reacting, he observes. He chooses compassion over retaliation. And what if the criticism is partially true? Then the Stoic accepts it, not bitterly, but gratefully. He thanks the critic for the reminder. He sharpens himself on the blade of discomfort. Marcus wrote, "If anyone can refute me, show me I'm making a mistake, or looking at things from the wrong perspective, I'll gladly change. It's the truth I'm after." But when the criticism is false, when it is distorted, weaponized, or cruel, the Stoic does not waste energy defending what needs no defense. He lets time speak. He lets his life speak. He lets his continued action, quiet and steady, dissolve the lie. There is a kind of quiet revenge in simply remaining excellent, in continuing your work, in showing over and over through your presence that no accusation can shape your soul, that your peace is rooted too deep for gossip to reach. Consider this. If you rush to defend yourself every time you're misunderstood, you become a slave to perception. You begin to live not by principle but by reputation. And reputations are fragile, they belong to others. Your character, however, is yours. And it must remain untouched, even when your name is dragged through the mud. The Stoic plays the long game. He understands that public opinion rises and falls, that people are fickle, that today's applause may become tomorrow's judgment. So he builds himself on the only ground that doesn't shake, his reason. Let them watch you stay calm. Let them expect an outburst and receive silence. Let them project outrage and find serenity. That difference, that stillness, is what makes you unbreakable. That is the moment when philosophy is no longer just words, but a living truth within you. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Public criticism tests this deeply, but the Stoic knows that control is internal. You may not control what is said about you, but you absolutely control how you carry yourself through it. And your silence, when chosen with clarity, becomes a weapon no one sees. It turns chaos into calm. It robs gossip of its power. It teaches others that you are not easily moved, not because you're cold, but because you're grounded. This is not suppression, it's redirection. You're not avoiding pain, you're transforming it. You're taking the hurt and using it to grow stronger roots. You are saying, "Yes, they may mock, but I will not mock back. They may twist, but I will not twist in return. They may speak, but I will not lose my silence to chase approval." And that silence, over time, will reveal what they never could: your strength, your patience, your depth. It will echo louder than any accusation ever could. So the next time you are criticized unfairly in public, pause, breathe, remain still. Let them see your discipline. Let them taste your restraint. And remember, silence is not empty, it's full of your strength. Situation 4. When you're tempted to brag about your achievements. There's a quiet moment after success, after a victory, an accomplishment, a moment of personal triumph, when a subtle urge arises, the urge to tell someone, to let them know what you've done, to describe the challenge, the struggle, and how you came through. The desire isn't always loud or arrogant. Often it feels innocent, maybe even noble. You simply want it to be seen, you want to be recognized. But this is where the Stoic must pause. Marcus Aurelius warned himself again and again, "Don't waste time proclaiming your good deeds. The fruit of noble action is to have acted." And this is a hard lesson, especially in a world that rewards visibility more than virtue. But Stoicism teaches a different path, one where silence after success is more powerful than praise. Why is it tempting to brag? Because recognition feels like proof. Proof that your efforts mattered. Proof that you are valuable. Proof that the struggle was worth it. But the Stoic does not seek proof in others' applause. He seeks it in his own reason, in the satisfaction of knowing that he did the right thing for the right reason, and that is enough. Bragging is a subtle theft. It steals your peace. It takes something sacred, your inner triumph, and places it into the fragile hands of others' approval. You begin to depend on their reaction. You begin to shape your actions, not by what is right, but by what will be praised. And slowly, without noticing, you drift from your center. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." Why? Because improvement requires silence. It requires obscurity. It requires you to work in the shadows, away from applause, away from the spotlight. The Stoic knows that real growth is invisible. It happens inside. It doesn't need to be announced. When you feel the need to brag, stop and examine what you're really craving. Is it attention? Is it validation? Is it superiority? These are not bad to notice. They are human, but they are not wise to obey. The Stoic observes these impulses like clouds passing across the sky, acknowledging them, but not chasing them. There is strength in letting your achievements remain private, in allowing your actions to speak louder than your stories, in living so well, so consistently, that your presence becomes the proof. You don't have to say it, they'll see it. And if they don't, it doesn't matter, because you didn't do it for them in the first place. There's a discipline in restraint, in doing something remarkable and telling no one, in keeping your victories quiet, not because you're hiding them, but because you're owning them, because they are yours, and they don't require an audience. Imagine a craftsman building a beautiful table. He sands it, shapes it, polishes it, not to post a photo, but because the work itself is meaningful. The result is a reflection of his inner standards, and whether anyone sees it or not, he is satisfied, because the joy was in the doing. This is the Stoic way, to let your life be your voice, to let your work be your introduction, to let your silence be your confidence. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, yet he constantly reminded himself not to boast, not to see himself as special, not to let the praise of others inflate his sense of self. Why? Because he knew how fragile fame is, how empty praise becomes, how dangerous it is to measure your worth by the applause of the crowd. When you speak of your achievements, ask yourself, am I sharing this to teach or to be admired? If the former, proceed with humility. If the latter, pause. The line is thin, but the difference is everything. One serves others, the other serves ego. Sometimes silence is misunderstood. People may think you've done nothing, that you've achieved nothing, that you're small, invisible, ordinary. Let them. The Stoic is not here to be impressive. He is here to be excellent, quietly, consistently, without fanfare. There is a kind of pride that grows stronger in silence, a pride that does not need to be voiced, that lives in the way you carry yourself, in the way you work, in the way you remain calm while others chase recognition. That pride is not vanity, it is self-respect. And what if someone else takes credit? What if your work is ignored? What if the spotlight falls on the wrong person? Still, you remain silent, not because it doesn't matter, but because you know the truth. You know what you did. You know what you endured. And no one can take that from you, not really. Silence is not about shrinking. It's about rising differently, quietly, inwardly, away from noise, away from performance, into the kind of self-possession that cannot be rattled by praise or criticism. And in that silence, you grow, you refine, you build a life that does not need a witness to be real. A life that is meaningful, not because others say it is, but because you know it is. So the next time you feel the urge to tell the world what you've done, pause. Let the silence answer for you. Let your actions breathe without explanation. Let your worth remain rooted in something deeper than recognition. You are not here to impress. You are here to become. Situation 3, when you're surrounded by loud opinions and empty noise. There comes a time, often more than once, when the air around you becomes thick with noise. Not physical noise, but mental, emotional, social. Everyone is speaking, everyone is certain. Opinions fly like arrows, commentary, reaction, outrage, each voice louder than the last. The news spins, the feeds scroll endlessly. The rooms you enter, physical or digital, are charged with tension, and in all of it there's pressure to speak, to join, to take a side. But the Stoic must ask himself, is speaking in this moment a duty or a surrender to the crowd? Marcus Aurelius lived in a Rome that was not quiet. The Senate was noisy, the public loud. Rumors flowed like rivers through the palace halls. And yet, he returned each day to silence, not because he couldn't speak, but because he chose not to be consumed. He wrote to himself, "The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know anything about the subject." This was not arrogance, it was clarity. You see, when the world grows loud, discernment becomes rare. And in that scarcity, silence becomes sacred. Stoicism does not demand that you never speak. It demands that you speak only when your words are worthy of your values, only when your reason is settled, only when silence would be a betrayal of your principles. In all other moments, silence is not just acceptable, it is wise. The need to comment on everything is not a sign of awareness. Often, it's a symptom of insecurity, of fearing irrelevance, of chasing recognition. But the Stoic does not chase relevance, he chases virtue. And virtue is rarely noisy. It doesn't shout, it doesn't rush, it does not enter every debate or fight every battle. It knows which hills are worth standing on and which are better passed in silence. When you are surrounded by loud opinions, ask yourself, are they seeking truth or dominance? Are they speaking from knowledge or from noise? Are they open or are they performing? These are not judgments, they are filters. You apply them not to condemn others, but to protect your own peace. The Stoic holds stillness like a shield. He lets the storm pass around him. He hears the chatter, but does not internalize it. He watches the noise, but does not echo it. He does not need to prove he's informed. He proves he's disciplined. There's a strength in not responding, in not reacting, in letting things be said without needing to counter them. This doesn't make you weak, it makes you deliberate. You are not passive, you are principled. You are not absent, you are observing. Because when everyone is talking, few are thinking. And when you are thinking clearly, your silence becomes a statement. It says, I am not here to impress. I am here to understand. I'm not here to be seen. I'm here to stay free, free from the pressure to perform, free from the addiction to be heard, free from the illusion that speaking is always action. In truth, the loudest person is often the most afraid, the one most in need of control. But the Stoic knows control starts within. When the world demands your reaction, you offer it only if it serves reason. You don't owe your voice to every cause, every controversy, every comment. You owe your voice to your character, and your silence protects it when the world would dilute it. This is not easy. It is deeply human to want to belong, to be in the conversation, to be on the right side. But the Stoic asks, whose side is that? And at what cost? If joining the crowd means leaving yourself, then what have you really gained? Silence in the age of noise is a rebellion. It is a form of resistance, not to truth, but to chaos. It is the choice to remain whole in a world that splinters minds into headlines and sound bites. It is the decision to build thoughts, not reactions. And what if someone asks for your opinion? What if silence is interpreted as weakness or ignorance? Let it be. You cannot control how others perceive your silence. You can only control why you choose it. If your silence is born of cowardice, then examine it. But if it is born of principle, then protect it. Marcus said, receive without pride. Let go without attachment. The same can be said of opinions. Receive them if they're useful. Let them pass if they're not. Do not attach your peace to the noise of others. Let your mind be a place of clarity, not chaos. You do not have to attend every argument you're invited to. You do not have to answer every comment. You do not have to react to every provocation. Your silence is your gatekeeper. It keeps the noise outside, so your reason can stay inside. So the next time the world grows loud around you and you feel the pull to speak, pause, ask, is this silence cowardice or composure? If it's the latter, then stay silent. Let the noise rage. Let the opinions clash. Let the storm circle and remain still. Because silence is not absence, it is presence purified, it is awareness sharpened, it is power restrained, and the Stoic in his silence says more than the crowd ever could. Situation 2, when emotions are running high. There is a moment, sometimes brief, sometimes long, when emotion takes the wheel. It surges suddenly, or it builds quietly until it breaks. Anger rises, fear tightens, grief floods, shame stings, desire pulls, And in that moment, we feel the pull to speak, to release, to react, to make our feelings known. The voice inside says, "Say something, now." But this is the moment the Stoic prepares for. This is where silence becomes not just an option, but a necessity. Marcus Aurelius, ruler of an empire and student of the soul, wrote, "When you are upset, remember, this isn't something that has to upset you. Inner peace begins the moment you choose not to allow another person or event to control your emotions." He wasn't speaking in abstraction. He was writing to himself, reminding himself that silence in the storm is power, not denial. When emotions are high, the first casualty is judgment. We stop seeing clearly. We lose proportion. Words rush to the tongue that we may regret before they leave the lips. The Stoic, however, sees the emotion rising, not with shame, but with attention. "There it is," he says. "Now I must be still." This silence is not repression, it's containment. It's the sacred space between impulse and action, between feeling and expression. It is not about pretending you don't feel. It's about deciding not to obey the first wave, not to let it drag you, not to give it the microphone of your voice. To be silent when emotions are high is to reclaim your authority. You may feel anger, but you do not become anger. You may feel fear, but you do not speak as fear. You may feel hurt, but you do not lash out from the wound. You remain, as Marcus urged, anchored in reason. Epictetus warned, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows." And when emotions take over, we become full of certainty, full of pain, full of justification. But silence makes room for learning. It allows us to sit with what we feel without being ruled by it, to observe it like clouds, like waves, like fire, temporary, intense but passing. Think of how many regrets begin with words spoken in heat. How many relationships are wounded, how many reputations damaged, how many doors closed because we could not hold our tongues in the moment of fire. The Stoic trains for this, not by denying emotion, but by building discipline. And discipline is a quiet thing. It's not visible in the moment, it's not praised by the crowd, but it's felt afterward, in the peace that follows the storm you didn't feed, in the dignity of knowing you remained whole when everything around and within wanted to split you apart. The world teaches you to express everything, to vent, to let it out, to be real. But Stoicism teaches you to be true, and truth sometimes means saying nothing until you've mastered what you're feeling. Until your reason, not your reaction, is what speaks. Imagine standing in front of someone who just wounded you, deeply. Every part of you wants to respond, to defend, to cut back. But the Stoic breathes. He recognizes, this is not the time. This is not the voice of my higher self. And so he waits. He steps back. He lets the moment pass. Not because he is weak, but because he is strong enough to wait for clarity. This kind of silence is sacred. It becomes a boundary, a shield, a refuge. It's the space where transformation happens, where emotion, given time, reveals what it's trying to teach, where you learn to distinguish between the voice of wisdom and the scream of ego. When emotions are high, your silence says, I am not ready to speak because I am still searching for truth. And it says, I care more about doing right than being right. It says, I refuse to let a temporary feeling define a permanent action. And that silence over time becomes a source of immense power. You begin to trust yourself. You begin to know that you can feel without collapsing, that you can burn without lashing out, that you can grieve, ache, rage, and still wait, still listen, still choose wisely. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Emotions are part of the mind. They rise from within, but they are not in control, not unless you hand them the reins. So the next time your emotions rise like a tide, pause. Say nothing. Let the silence be your practice. Let it be your offering to your higher self. Let it be the ground on which you stand while the winds blow. And when the emotion passes, as it always does, you will still be there, still whole, still clear. And then, if there are words to say, they will come, not from the wound, but from the wisdom that silence protected. Situation 1. When you're about to make a life-altering decision. There are moments in life when everything slows down, moments before a decision that will split your path, take the job or turn it down, stay or leave, speak or stay silent, commit or walk away. These moments arrive without warning but carry a weight that presses against the soul. And in these moments, noise becomes dangerous. Voices crowd your mind, friends, family, fears, desires, memories, projections. Everyone has something to say, including the parts of yourself you don't fully trust. But the Stoic knows this is not a moment to speak. This is a moment for silence. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. But how do you know what is right? How do you hear what is true when so much within and around you is shouting? You create stillness, you retreat inward, you let the noise die down so you can hear the voice that matters most, your reason. Silence before a major decision is not avoidance, it is preparation. It is gathering the pieces of yourself scattered by fear, by longing, by pressure, and holding them together long enough to think clearly. This silence is not empty. It's full of listening, full of alignment, full of questions that pierce deeper than advice ever could. What is truly in my control here? What am I afraid of losing? What am I hoping to gain? What principle will I be violating if I say yes or if I say no? These questions require space, and silence is space. It's the opposite of panic, the opposite of haste, and the opposite of noise disguised as urgency. We live in a world that worships speed. Decide now. Act fast. Don't overthink. But the Stoic understands that life-altering choices are sacred ground. You don't rush over sacred ground. You walk it slowly. You examine each step, because once taken, it cannot be undone. Epictetus reminds us, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. The Stoic does not ask, what should I do, before asking, who am I? That identity, built through discipline, reflection, and virtue, is what should decide, not fear, not impulse, not the pressure of others. When you're on the edge of a major decision, emotion clouds the air, doubt whispers, desire seduces, anxiety pretends to be logic, and it's tempting to talk it out endlessly, to collect opinions, to poll your friends, to externalize the responsibility. But the Stoic knows that the clearest answers come not from more voices, but from fewer, sometimes from none at all. This is why the practice of silence is so crucial. In silence, your thoughts become visible, your motives become clear. The things you're afraid to admit rise to the surface. The ego loses its mask. You see yourself without distortion, and that clarity is worth more than any advice. Think about Marcus, standing alone in his study before dawn, writing his meditations not for the world, but for himself. He didn't consult an audience, he consulted his reason. He entered silence, not because he had no guidance, but because he trusted the guidance within. And when you finally act, when the decision is made, it should rise from stillness, not from noise, from conviction, not convenience, from principle, not panic. You should be able to say, I chose this, not because it was easy or popular, but because it was right, by my own measure. And what if you make the wrong decision? The Stoic prepares for that too. You do not demand perfection. You demand integrity. If you chose in good faith with clarity and principle, then even a painful outcome cannot destroy you, because it did not break your code, it did not drag you from your path. Sometimes silence reveals that the right choice is to wait, to delay, to gather more understanding. And sometimes it reveals that the time to act is now, but only silence could tell the difference. This kind of decision-making is rare, it is slow, it is deliberate, it is free from ego, and it is powerful. So when you find yourself at a crossroads, when the stakes are high and the pressure is rising, step back. Say nothing. Go into silence. Let the world chatter. Let your fears shout. Let your hopes surge. But do not speak. Not yet. Wait until your reason stands alone. Then move. There is a silence that breaks you, and another that builds you. In a world that moves faster each day, that rewards noise over wisdom, that praises visibility more than virtue, silence has become rare. And yet, as you've walked through these 10 situations with me, situations where Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca would have chosen stillness over speech, you've felt something, haven't you? Not absence, presence, because silence, in the Stoic sense, is not about doing nothing. It's about doing what matters most, guarding your reason, protecting your peace, refining your character. You've learned that silence is strength when you're misunderstood, that it is wisdom when you're surrounded by loud opinions, that it is mastery when you're full of emotion, that it is courage when you witness injustice and stay true without being dragged into the fire. The Stoics never taught us to be passive. They taught us to be deliberate, to wait, to reflect, to act from principle, not from impulse. And in each of these moments, silence becomes a kind of shield, not one you hide behind, but one you carry into the world, polished by discipline and patience. It allows you to navigate chaos without becoming chaotic. It keeps you from being reduced to what the moment demands. It allows you to choose, not just how to act, but who to be. You see, anyone can react, but it takes discipline to pause. It takes wisdom to say nothing when your pride screams. It takes strength to walk away from a fight that would only cost you your peace. Silence is the breath between stimulus and response. It is where you become untouchable, not because the world has changed, but because you have. And what do you gain in this silence? Clarity, integrity, sovereignty. You begin to realize that not everything deserves your reaction, that not every insult needs an answer, that not every success needs to be shared, that not every argument is worth entering, that not every truth must be spoken, at least not immediately. You begin to live not for attention, but for alignment, not to be heard, but to be whole. You measure yourself not by the noise you make, but by the strength of the silence you keep, because silence teaches you patience. It teaches you to listen, not just to others, but to yourself, to hear your fears without being ruled by them, to feel your anger without obeying it, to experience your pain without lashing out. That is power, not domination, but self-possession. And isn't that what Marcus Aurelius practiced? Amid wars, betrayals, plagues, and pressure beyond imagination, he still reminded himself, hold your tongue, examine your judgments, let reason rule. Even when the world was burning around him, he returned to the silence of the soul. That's what Stoicism is. Not detachment, but discipline. Not numbness, but presence. Not silence for silence's sake, but silence as a sacred tool of transformation. And now, as this journey through 10 moments of silence comes to an end, I'll leave you with this. Let your life become a meditation of restraint. Let your words be rare and meaningful. Let your presence be louder than your voice. Let your silence become the space where virtue grows. Let others rush to be seen while you stay rooted. Be the one who holds his center while others spiral. Be the one who pauses while others panic. Be the one who chooses peace, not because he's weak, but because he's done being ruled by noise. And when the time comes to speak, when your silence has served its purpose, when your reason is clear and your character is aligned, then speak with calm, with weight and with purpose, not to be heard but to be true.